It's time for the paper trail. So this is a deep dive into the newspapers, the headlines to let you know what's going on because some people haven't got time to read newspapers. So we do it and that you don't have to.
Also because it's our job. And with us to make sense of it all is senior political journalist from Eyewitness News, Theto Mahlokwana. Theto, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so when we look at the papers, no surprises here. Former President Zuma, day 2 at the Zondo Commission Interstate Capture, leading the papers. But newspapers picking up on different things. The Sowetan picking up on the former president's inability to recall some pretty big details. So when he started on Monday, he had pretty clear memory of what happened in 1990 and 91. When he was asked about a meeting in 2017, not so much.
Yeah, he had time.
On Monday, he also told us that as president, he didn't deal with DGs, that it was the ministers' jobs to do that. And then yesterday, he tells us that, in fact, yes, he did deal with a DG. He also told us that he dealt with business people, which he said, as president, this is normal. Esma Khashula on the sidelines also saying, of course this is normal. Us as leaders meet with business people all the time. And I don't understand why Esma Khashula made that confession, because it now implicates everyone, not just the president, but him and all other leaders who meet with business. So interesting testimony yesterday, not as fiery as Monday.
Okay, now here's the thing, and maybe we could save this for today in politics, but we may as well just go into the paper trail.
Yeah.
For me, what it seemed like, and we kind of touched on it yesterday, he came out guns blazing on Monday, literally revealing everything and possibly implicating himself in some dubious actions up until the tea break. The tea break would have been the first time that his lawyers got a chance to speak to him after having heard what he had said, because they said, look, we don't know what he's going to say.
We don't know who he's going to name.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it seemed to me that after the tea break, he changed the tune. So guys, I don't know. It just seems like somebody may have said, okay, hold up, slow your roll. What are your thoughts?
I think it's quite different to when the former state president, of course, was presenting his opening statement. That is pretty much a fluid story that one would tell from their perspective without being questioned about it, without being in any way, asked for more detail, because they're just basically relating what they've experienced as opposed to when they're being questioned. And I think that's why we've seen the kind of change in tactic and response from the former president in how he's been replying to the questions yesterday, as opposed to when he was much more freer with the detail on the first day of his appearance. Now, yesterday, we also saw his legal counsel, of course, interjecting because they felt that the commission was moving a bit outside its terms of reference in terms of investigating corruption and fraud in the public service, as now relating to Zuma about meetings and phone calls, which he was not party to, which is also something that I think choked him up a little bit, because then he realized just how critical it is to stay on course with the script. Because even the early adjournment yesterday, because they did, Skikagani actually asked the inquiry if they could actually just adjourn early, around after 3 o'clock, to say that, it's been a long day, the president may be tired. Just as he was starting to go into the testimony of Barbara Hogan, who is a former public enterprises minister. Now, if he had done that without having, like you say, liaised with his legal counsel, he may have implicated himself pretty much, because they had not briefed him on how to actually approach that testimony.
Even on Monday, he started answering like hypothetical situations, right? Saying things like, well, fine, if I had made that call. And I was thinking to myself, why would you even want to do this?
I think it's just part of his strategy to appear, right, like the Sowetan says, as this old man whose memory is failing him, right? But at the same time, allow himself enough room to say, I did not perjure myself. I did not actually say that did not happen. As in how he answered the questions around the former GCR SDG, Themba Maseko. When he was asked, could you have made that call? He said, I spoke to DGs all the time. I could have made that call. Only correcting them on the question of whether he called them Mfanakiti or Mfoetu, saying that, actually, no, but that is not my phrase. I would not ordinarily say that. It sounds like someone was trying very hard to remember what I would have said. So he's creating a lot of legroom for him not to be in any way drawn back, because all of these things are going to come back. All these people he's mentioning, they're going to have to come back and cross-examine him, because now he has stated his case on record. And he knows that he's going to have to be able to defend all of these issues that he's bringing up, even allow himself the room to say, but I did not actually say that happened that way. I'm saying that I don't quite remember it as well, but I think it did happen. And interesting that you should mention Ace Magashule's comments outside of the commission, Google, because he then yesterday says, you know, I've been in the NEC of the ANC since the beginning of time, since we're unbanned. And I know for sure that the things that the former state president is talking about did happen. Now you have the MK Council, which is saying, actually, no, Makura Matlodi and General Sipho Nyanda are good comrades that we've worked with, and we back them up. So we're going to see a lot of these contradictions as the former president goes on with his testimony.
Now, let me ask both you, Googs and Teto, right? A mundane thing, such as a phone call, right? Which happens, I imagine, a lot when you're a president, or a meeting. If I say, I can't remember the details of a meeting I had 5 years ago, but I certainly can remember seeing Google's name in a list of spies. Surely that's believable. You can understand that, no?
I can. No, I can.
Yes.
It's the significance of the incident
Yes.
that it gets etched in your memory. Now, if you called me 5 days ago to tell me that if indeed this was the norm, he was making all these calls, right, to the Guptas and being the middleman between this family and everyone in government who has some sort of influence, he wouldn't remember how many calls he made to DGs now, would he? But remembering that your comrade was a spy, that's something I wouldn't forget either.
So yesterday, once again, former President Zuma reiterating that he didn't make big decisions like cabinet reshuffles without consultation with the top six. Most notably, this was his line and has been his line after the very surprise firing of Pravin Gordhan and who was his deputy at the time? They were in, they were in London on a roadshow. They were called back, told to come back home. Apparently, the president had decided they shouldn't go. Then there were rumors of intelligence reports, which was actually a WhatsApp, that they'd been fired because they were going to be plotting a coup, and there were forces working with them to overthrow President Zuma, and it was also against BRICS. So it all got very, 007 stuff, right? But he says the top six knew. When the news broke, the likes of Gwede Mantashe and Jesse Duarte said, we are hearing it as you are hearing it as the media. But he has long said the party knew, certainly the leadership, which I think is interesting because it kind of opens the door to what else did they know? Because they argued they didn't know about state capture, they didn't know about the firing of Pravin. There were a lot of things that were happening in government that they didn't know about. But he's repeatedly said, but I briefed you as the leadership, which seemingly is him implicating the top six.
Which would also make sense because the ANC has always said that nobody just gets into a position of leadership out of the ether, right? You get deployed by the ANC, which is actually why they always say, then I get surprised when people get to office and don't implement the policies and the resolutions of the ANC. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, it's quite interesting. It's one of the stories that I also picked up yesterday on his basically confirmation of something we know not to be true, because every time, it came up that he did somehow decide in the middle of the night to reshuffle the cabinet, it was not information that was privy to the ANC top six or the alliance partners, who eventually were the first to call for his sacking for that particular purpose because he was not consulting them on government decisions. Now, if you come to the commission and say that, I've always only ever consulted the ANC top six and the alliance partners and never the Guptas, and also he goes on and he leaves this big room for imagination and he says, but when he's asked, but could they have gotten the information elsewhere? And he says, yes, they could have. I imagine they could have, which means that if I've told this close-knit circle of people this particular information, he's basically saying anyone in that circle of the alliance and the ANC top six could have been the leak to the Gupta family. And, it's typical Zuma strategy, though, that he's always just, he puts something out, he just drops the bomb, and, whoever ends up with the fragments of that bomb is up to them. Because whatever the commission makes of the information is up to the commission. What he does is just to give that information. But coming back to what this then does to the ANC, in effect, is it casts a lot of doubt. The request for the establishment of a commission, we've been here before with the Nugas and the spy tapes, and we saw what that did to the ANC as an organization. But not only then was it in a better state than it currently is, factionally, but we also find it affecting not only the ANC, but the very nature of the running of government. So you may find a situation where we end up in a worse state, either economically or as a body politic in the country as a result of whatever will emanate out of state capture as we did going into it. So it's a fine line that I think is going to be very peculiar to navigate for the party itself. But we'll see if they will establish that commission. I wouldn't bet on it because they've been there before and they know the kind of damage that does to their reputation and entire image together.
If somebody were to say the ANC is already damaged, irreparably so, what would you say to that?
Look, I wouldn't say irreparably because the ANC knows its problems and it's up to the ANC to fix its problems. They go into conference and they've all identified the problem, that they go into conference divided, factionalized because they back different candidates. However, coming out of conference, they struggle to reunite. You know, they faked some sort of a united picture. Just going into elections, it's a united picture that, of course, they cannot keep up with anymore because now we voted. But it's absolutely up to the ANC. They've diagnosed their problems for the longest time. So I wouldn't say it's irreparable. It's only irreparable when people cannot admit what their weaknesses are. And I think they know what their problems are.
Teto, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We'll be watching the Zondo Commission closely and, of course, unpacking a lot more of these issues as it goes.